Hello and welcome to ChariTepulse, your regular update on news and happenings in the charity sector, the podcast where purpose meets personality. I'm James Saunders, I'm a partner at Moore Kingston Smith, and I'm joined as ever by my co-hosts Catherine Rastromji, partner and head of charities at Shakespeare Martineau, and Charles Mesquita, charities director at Quilted Cheviot. And we're going to dive, as ever, into the heart of the charity sector, unpack those big issues, spotlight those unsung heroes, and share the stories that matter. You may be listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or any of our respective organisations' websites. However you're listening, you're very welcome. But please don't forget to like and follow and subscribe and generally hit any positive feedback buttons you can for us, on the presumption, of course, you find these sessions useful. I'm going to start with a article from, now we don't often credit the Oxford Mail, but we've got some input from them this week about a railway charity that it appears there's been a bit of a disagreement between the trustees and the CEO. The CEO has resigned, and the departure, it seems, was last month, January. But he has posted on LinkedIn and expressed his dissatisfaction with undue involvement by the trustee board. So, Catherine, I'll come to you first. We've talked before about the balance between trustees and executives, if you like. Clearly, it's gone wrong here. Any thoughts on having read this situation?
Other than there are no winners, I think, whenever it gets to this point. But the bit that lost me immediately was when people talk about charities and then start making a distinction between the non-exec and the executive, as if we have a unitary board that's made up of both, when we don't. The board is made up of the trustees who, yes, they are non-executive directors. But I find that when people lead with the non-exec label, they're assuming almost that the trustees are trumped by the exec, and that's where you get this kind of the trustees are interfering, they're getting involved in things that they shouldn't. Whereas I suppose from my point of view, when I would do trustee training, I'd be talking about it's the trustees who have legal responsibility for everything that's going on within the charity. So if for some reason they have amended the delegated authority to the chief exec, if they felt they needed to get more involved here, that would have been a board decision, which is not to say it was wrong to do that. So reading between the lines, it was whether it was the change that one party didn't like and the others had validly decided to do. I did notice they'd got some funding from Heritage Lottery, I think. So you wonder whether that had made them think we need to get more involved in monitoring this. But I think anything where you're having a spat in social media it's not good for the charity. And that was more, I was thinking, you're just tainting the charity in all of this.
Yeah, it's rather an element of dirty laundry in public, isn't it? Charles, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because this guy, Clive Hetherington, had been with the organisation for 5 years. So you would have thought he'd had a relationship with the board. It does slightly, from reading the press, appear that he's thrown his toys out of the pram. I think it's a big mistake to play this out in social media, just because, at the end of the day, everybody's a loser. And we mustn't forget this is, of course, is a charity doing important work. I mean, the relationship between the executive, the senior management team, and trustees, there's always a tension there. But actually, for those that are successful, they work at it, and you don't always agree. And there are times where you just got to take a step back, haven't you, and then a breather with it. But the one thing I always try and do is to keep reminding myself is that we should be, focusing on the sort of the bigger picture and the strategy. And not get too involved in the day-to-day detail. However, as Catherine rightly pointed out, as trustees, we're ultimately responsible, and therefore we do need to be the critical friend, and we do need to be monitoring what's going on and keeping a check on things. So, yeah, I hope that Mr. Hetherington hasn't made a decision that was made in haste that he'll regret in leisure.
Okay. Good. Turning to a slightly higher profile story from this last week or so. The Prime Minister, he managed to find time to make a speech. This is the one in Hastings, I think, a few days ago, when a speech which caused a few, amongst other things, caused a few concerns to be raised over comments to do with much stronger powers for the Charity Commission to close charities that promote extremism. So it's slightly unfortunate that sort of at the same time as he's unveiling some quite chunky investment plans, this has rather trumped the news cycle, if you like. So Charles, I'll come to you first on this one. What do you think about this and the Charity Commission becoming a little bit more, a little stronger in, as I say, closing charities that promote extremism?
I, I'm not sure that that's the Charity Commission's role. I mean, if this is something that is breaking the law, surely that should sit with the police and as a criminal prosecution. I'm not sure that the Charity Commission, I mean, we know because the last time we discussed it that they're employing another 80 odd people because they're short staffed. Do they really need this additional power? Is this, I mean, Catherine tells us whether where they haven't. I mean, the fact of the matter is, any charity set up has a very clear purpose of what it's there to do, which must be charitable. I don't see where extremism sits in that. And the Charity Commission has power to remove trustees, and they have powers to direct. So why do they need these additional powers? I have to say, I read it and just went, I couldn't see why they needed it.
Catherine, any thoughts?
Interesting, isn't it? When I first read it, I thought, fine, if the Charity Commission needs additional powers, give them additional powers. But I would take Charles's point entirely because the promotion of extremism is not a charitable purpose, kids. So if that is what a charity is doing, the Charity Commission already has all the powers it needs to say, that's not a charitable purpose, you're not a charity, you will be removed, and your assets will be given to another charity, end of. Also, it does say there's no detail on what the powers might be, no details about when it might come in. So I think let's not panic. I think sometimes we can get a bit OTT about, oh God, this is awful. We don't even know what it is yet.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Next segment is about impact. So there's been a couple of focuses around this in the last week or so. So David Holdsworth, Chief Executive, Charity Commission, had a speech this week at an impact event. Let's be fair, it was an event for philanthropy and impact, but talking about the delivery of impact and how charities report it, how they sell it, if you like, and suggesting that charities need to be better at getting their impact across. I mean, this comes at the same time as I've talked about a few times recently, the new charity SORP, so that's the recommended practice standard, which tells you how accounts are supposed to be prepared, has focused on charities reporting impact more fully in their future accounts. So is there a much wider focus on impact, do you feel, in the last 12 months or so? Is this a bit of a sea change, Catherine?
I think you will see it in a slightly different way. Sometimes when I talk to my clients about they should say more about their impact, they get very nervous about saying anything that they can't prove almost as a scientific exercise, that we haven't had that independently assessed to work out spend a pound equals £2.50 benefit kind of thing. Whereas actually impact is that's your output. That's the difference you're making in the world. It doesn't have to be translated into pound and pence. I did think David Holdsworth's comments, chimed very much with what we've said on our podcast previously, is that if charities are not articulating what they're doing, how are people going to know? So I think there is a missed opportunity at times, but I do wonder, some I think have gone too far with the empirical evidence of impact, and I think some are being far too cautious because they're not saying anything at all. So probably there is a sweet spot in the middle. the Office for the Impact Economy sounded very grand, and of course had the hub and spoke model, which I think they always love to drop in, that that's the way they're going to do it, these champions and experts. But I think there is just a today charities could make more, tell people more, let people know what they're doing, and that could only be a positive thing.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, that was the other side to this was an article this week or a report this week on these Office for the Impact Economy champions being developed around the UK. So there's that, as you said, Catherine, that second element to this. Charles, anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reflecting back. If you remember, we had that round table, didn't we, with Professor Peter Frumpkin, who's at the Gradle Institute, was talking about the difference between the US and the UK. And the one thing that he definitely said is that the US has gone down this road about measuring impact and the amount of money that is wasted of trying to do that. And a whole industry has been born out of it. Where here, thankfully, that is not the case. I always reflect back, and there are a lot of occasions where you just can't measure the impact. I think about Glasspool spending 2 million a year helping people in financial hardship, and we did get Pro Bono Economics to have a look at this from a benevolent point of view, and they came back and actually they said it was inconclusive of what they could prove. And you just think, but intuitively, if somebody hasn't got a cooker and you can give that things, it must help them. So I think there's a lot of things that we just have to fundamentally take on belief without, as Catherine rightly pointed out, of being able to prove it to a degree that you've got the piece of paper and saying this is what it is. So yeah.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Fraud. I struggle to ever get through a one of these episodes that I host without turning to fraud at some point because it always catches my eye. A recent report from the fraud advisory panel shows on fraud showing that charities reporting reduced levels of fraud and reportedly the lowest level for 5 years, which is, good, I suppose. It's decreasing, showing that maybe controls and awareness is helping. But equally, the expectation, a majority of organisations are planning for or expecting to be hit by fraud in the next year, are fearing the worst, if you like. And at the same time, also the final reporting on a case of fraud, which unfortunately ended up with the charity closing, which was the Pennywell Youth Project, and the embezzler, having been sentenced this last week or so for her crimes, managed to embezzle, it's reported, £285,000 in a charity that recorded an income of 425,000 in a year. So, an enormous proportion of income being stolen, albeit over more than 1 year. But it's difficult to see quite how it all got missed. But a resolution, if you like, to quite a long stuff. And of course, the other point it's worth noting is that the crimes happened 2020 to 2022. It's 2026 now. She's just been sentenced. Gosh, these things to take a long time to get resolved. I appreciate it's the way of the world these days. But Catherine, I'll come to you first. I mean, going back to the original report on fraud, do you get the feeling from your clients that they are suffering less from fraud than they have done in the last few years? Is it people more aware?
Yeah, and I suppose I don't know if it's just the nature of my client base that I'm not hearing it. So when we see it reported so often, I think it can make charities think, my God, everybody is out to get us. Fraud is on the up, trust no one, we're a high risk sector. So I thought this report actually is quite reassuring in a way, because then I worry that people are focusing on preventing fraud and maybe they're not looking after some other areas that are in reality a higher risk for them. I did think it interesting because they talked about those charities that were hit by fraud. 21% had 10 or more incidents. And I wondered what they class as an incident, whether it's each transaction, because the lady that had been jailed, I just thought was an absolute travesty that that charity has closed as a
Mm.
result of one employee's actions. And also because if you read in another article her argument why she did it, she said, I did this during COVID because we were hard hit by financial cuts and I was trying to make money gambling online that I would then have put into the charity to prop it up and give it an income stream. Now, whether that was ever believed at court, I really hope not. But it just shows you, doesn't it? I suppose the way people will justify it. But I do wonder whether it's that internal threat that is more of a reality than external, and if it is, what charities are doing about that.
Yeah. Charles?
Yeah, there were sort of three things. I mean, that I sort of looked at it. What the first thing is, I wonder how many charities are actually reporting fraud, because I'm not sure that you certainly from the occasions where I've had any involvement with that, you just never quite know what then happens and whether the police will then take it up and do anything about it. So that's the first thing. To my mind, the most important thing about this is that most fraud appears to be internal. So this, to me, is from a trustee's point of view, is going back and making sure you're checking your internal protocols are robust. And the interesting thing about this lady, yes, and how she thought she was going to gamble her charity, well, out of a financial problem, assuming that's what it was. But this happened over an 18-month period. I mean, why did if you're taking 283,000 quid out of with an organisation that's got a turnover of 400,000, you would have thought somebody would have noticed this money going and questioning it, and why wasn't it done a lot earlier? So I think moral to story here is I don't think fraud is falling. I would be very suspicious of those stats, but the internal bit is, to my mind, is the bit where we can really do something about as trustees.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've covered that there's the old fraud triangle, which is incentive or pressure, rationalization, and opportunity. And clearly, the opportunity one, Charles, is what you're covering there.
Yeah.
She seems to have had the opportunity, and then you covered really, Catherine, the rationalization, which is, oh no, I was gambling to give it back. And the pressure being we were short of money. So it fits quite nicely into that, but clearly something is not quite right. Okay, good. Last one is kind of good news, but I say good news, but with a slightly cloudy lining, if you like, and a slightly odd one. Mind receiving the largest single donation in its history. Firstly, it seems it might be something to do with crypto, maybe from a philanthropist. So it's $10 million. It's a great, great big lump of money to support its work over the next decade. Brilliant. It's all good news as far as it goes. Verified through blockchain. So I suppose the first question is, I mean, how comfortable are we with big crypto donations? Should that be the case here? And even if it isn't, I wonder how many charities really are set up to accept if they were such large crypto donations these days. How comfortable are trustees with this sort of thing? And the other point around this start article was that it was referenced as semi-unrestricted. And Catherine, I'll come to you first on that because I personally don't quite understand how anything can be semi-unrestricted. As far as I'm concerned, under charity law, a donation is either restricted or it is not. And it's a question of charity law, not what you want to call it. But the whole thing just seemed to open a few questions about the modern way of receiving donations and what I think the sector is probably going to have to deal with more and more over the next few years. So, as I say, Catherine, I'll come to you first on this generally, and particularly the question of whether a donation can be semi-unrestricted.
Yeah, I mean, that was what stood out to me. I mean, I saw it as the crypto donation, and I was thinking with my trustee hat on, we have had some discussions on different boards about would we be comfortable taking crypto. And I'm saying, we're not experts. We don't know how to manage crypto. We haven't got the processes in place. So I'd be very uncomfortable from a personal point of view. If this was my charity, I'd be thinking, I don't know about this. But I did laugh when I saw the quotes semi-unrestricted and thought, what a silly nonsense. Because if you use that terminology, semi-unrestricted means it is also semi-restricted, which is an impossibility. It is either restricted or it is not. So you can't just make up terms to, justify what this is. I just thought that was silly, really, and not true as a question of fact. But Charles might have more of a sensible on the crypto, because I was just thinking, oh no, not for me, makes me very nervous.
I mean, the Charity Commission has blogged on cryptocurrencies and crypto donations. I'm not sure it's had any formal guidance on it or not, but it's certainly tackled it in some ways. But Charles, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as a trustee, funny enough, quite a large charity, we've been looking at the ability to accept crypto, and having gone out and spoken to a number of the larger fundraising charities that have got involved with this, most of them take it in and sell it immediately. And then we tried to look at some platforms of which we could hold them on, and that's proving to be quite difficult. But there are things, exchange traded loan notes and exchange traded funds, which you can effectively have exposure to, which is, I suppose, is a different way of looking at it. But as an investment management company, I mean, although we have the ability to not deal in crypto itself as an asset, but in the form of loan notes, it's, again, from a regulatory point of view, is quite difficult from an advice point of view. Not that we would necessarily want to own it. So it's still, I mean, crypto, although it's had a lot of headlines and is certainly very volatile from a price point of view, there's still quite a lot of Wild West going on, and it is not as regulated, which is why I suspect most charities in the UK can't accept it and don't accept it. So, but yeah, this is a work in progress, certainly from one of the organisations I'm involved with.
Charles, have you come across non-fungible tokens at all, and these types of assets?
Yeah, we've discussed those as well. And again, it's the problem is how do you value them? At least with crypto, you do have a value, because you get into all sorts of issues with the auditor and with HMRC. So I think, and then it's your ability to hold it.
Yeah.
Because it's the custody element of it which is proving to be a real problem, because you've got to have an organization that you can trust, and because these are things if you lose the password, you've got all sorts of problems, and there have been certainly enough people who've done that.
And people hunting through garbage tips for hard drives. I mean, those. I mean, that's another thing. I think, as you say, it's early stages, but charities are going to have to get to grips with these. I mean, these non-fungible non-fungible tokens are things that I've heard of. I haven't actually come across yet, but I'm sure they're on the horizon. These digital assets, digital arts assets that, as you say, don't have a nominal value, but you've got to find some way of putting something on them.
But charities have a problem anyway, just accepting normal shares. If you haven't got an investment manager, you try and go and sell shares as a charity. If you're a small organisation, nobody wants to deal with it or do it. These days.
Okay.
So I think there are a whole lot of issues probably that are bigger than just those.
Yeah. Good. Okay. That's probably all we've got time for this week. We've covered an awful lot of ground there. So thank you, Charles. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you to the listener for tuning into this episode. We hope that we were useful today. We offered some insight, some inspiration, and some better understanding of some aspects of this most important world of charity and social impact. If you've got any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please do let us know. But we aim to ensure there's something here for charity professionals, passionate volunteers, or anyone who's trying to make a difference out there. Don't forget, please, to follow us, leave a review, share our podcast with your network, and join us next time as we continue to explore the challenges and opportunities facing our sector. Thanks very much. Bye-bye for now.